So today I'm going to walk through my Sprout Animated Adventures microlearning. And a couple of people have asked me to sort of go through or do kind of like live walkthroughs of these courses that I create and sort of talk a little bit about what I do in terms of the interactivity, the functionality, but also why I make certain decisions in terms of the graphic design and the visual design. So I'm not going to go into like too much depth in terms of how I created these images, because that would be kind of a whole other video in itself. But I am going to walk through sort of why I chose specific styles, colours, why I chose specific blocks, and how this contributes to the overall brand message and tone of voice and sort of feel, I suppose, that I wanted to get through with this microlearning. So, to set a bit of context, I am a big believer that e-learning or digital learning can be a fantastic tool for marketing and not just for sort of traditional senses of things like compliance learning or to kind of get a learner from one place to another in the sense of gaining a new skill or whatever. I actually think it can be a really fantastic way of pushing information out to people. So, with this in mind, I came up with the idea for a product launch microlearning for this fictional company, Sprout. Now, Sprout's sort of fictional ethos is very playful. It's a mix of combining technology with traditional play methods, so things like books and colouring and puzzles and all of that kind of stuff, but actually not shying away from technology and not seeing it as something very evil or that's, rotting kids' brains or whatever, but actually coming up with these creative ways that technology can be integrated with children's play. So that is kind of the whole sort of overall message, I suppose, that is wanting to come through with this particular e-learning. And to link in with that, they have created this fictional product that's called Animated Adventures, which essentially, in a very quick nutshell, is a toy that the child gets like a selection of these tiny little characters, and then they can play in their house and or outside or at the park, and they can place these characters around these sort of different environments, and then they take a picture with their tablet or their phone using the Sprout app, and they can actually create these animated little story videos. So when they snap the characters, say outside in their back garden under a bush, they then go onto the app with the help of their parent, and the character can come alive. They can choose animations, a little bit like a combination of kind of Beyond Canva style. So they'd be able to like click a default animation and the character would walk or wave or whatever, that kind of thing. They also have the option to add things like text and effects and sound and all of that kind of stuff. And they can either export this as a video or as a book, an actual physical storybook that they can then read with their parents. And again, that's tying in that whole combination of traditional play methods with technology. So, with this kind of fictional brand, I really wanted it to be as fun, as playful, as childish as possible. And you'll notice that throughout, I've used these kind of icons here. And to me, these were kind of representative of doodles. And I don't know about anybody else, but when I was a kid, I was forever getting told off for doodling on my books and on my work and everything. So I kind of wanted to pull this through because to me, doodling is very childish. It's a very creative thing to do as well. So I've used these kind of different icons, not only to represent what Sprout does, but also to link in with this new product as well. We've also got this very playful kind of bold, bubbly font. Now, this is only used for headings because obviously as a body text, it would not be accessible and it would be very, very difficult to read. So this is combined with pop-ins as just a simple body text as well. But again, this particular font was chosen and it's in lowercase, again, to just get across that real sort of fun and childish. And I used to do bubble writing all the time as well, and I remember sort of doing that at school on my artwork and everything. So it's really kind of pulling in that nostalgic, quite fun, happy memories of being a kid. So as we scroll down, you can see I've integrated these doodles and these little arrows throughout my Rise blocks. And the arrows are useful in that they focus the eye centrally to the text or the content that is on screen. Now, it was really important to me to not have a lot of repetition with microlearnings, and particularly with quite simple authoring tools like Rise. It can be very easy to fall into the habit of having similar blocks very close together. So although this is only 10 minutes, I wanted it to be as engaging and as creative and as maximalist as possible. So you'll see here we've got a repeat pattern background. There's lots of colour, there's lots of detail, there's lots of illustration. And this was done purposely for it to feel very maximalist, which I think for me is very reminiscent of children's toys and children's marketing anyway. So the intended audience of this e-learning is Sprout colleagues, and this could be anybody from someone working in store to somebody in the social media team to somebody that is in head office. So it's essentially an introduction to this new product, Animated Adventures, and it's providing a kind of top level intro into what the product is, the key dates, so when it's going to be launched, when any marketing is going to go live, that kind of thing. And then some details about how the product is going to evolve, and also a little competition that they are going to run to help market it as well. So the kind of key learning outcomes with this are to enable the colleague to not only kind of be able to sell this product, be able to talk about it, but also kind of understand how it fits in with Sprout's ethos and with Sprout's current product range. So carrying on with that doodle theme, I've combined a mix of photography and illustration here. And again, I wanted this to look like somebody had kind of drawn over the images, and it feel like a little bit of a mind map or an idea piece. So somebody might have had this image and gone, oh, I wonder, and then like they're jotting down their ideas and drawing all over it and everything. We've got this lovely wavy divider here, and we've got one down here, and that is because of the Mighty plugin. So you can use spacer blocks, but I've used their transition feature here, which has allowed me to integrate this repeat pattern really nicely and really seamlessly without having to spend hours on Illustrator. So really good function of Mighty, and I'd really recommend it using that if you have the Mighty plugin. So I've used a repeat pattern as the background here, and the reasoning behind this is repeat patterns are not only great for being quite visually striking, they fill up white space if you're finding that you've got a lot of blank space either side of, say, some text or whatever. But also they're great for things like videos because they scale really nicely, and you can use them for knowledge checks too, because as we all know, knowledge checks zoom in when you answer, so the background kind of comes bigger. And if you use photography or anything, it can kind of go a bit weird because then you risk the image going behind the knowledge check or becoming really large and then sort of not really scaling very well. So with repeat patterns, you don't tend to have that issue. So this section is about the product itself, and a very quick introduction. And I could have just done a sort of little text box like this, or maybe even like a process block, but I wanted, again, this to be as engaging, as interesting as possible, and to really embody that feeling of play and, childishness, but in a good way. So I thought a nice 30 to 40 second explainer video would be perfect for this. So I'm just going to play it and turn the volume off because it's very loud. And this was just created on Canva, and I combined some of these existing icons that I have here and used Canva's feature, so their text feature and their animation feature, to just layer this over stock footage and some AI imagery. So this image here is AI, and that is because obviously if this was a real client project, we would have pictures of these toys, but we don't. And this, I wanted to just be a very quick intro into what the product is, how it works, and kind of why it integrates well with what Sprout are doing. And for me, that's just a nicer way of getting across that information than using just text. And also it's because I chose to do that because I knew that coming up there was going to be a fair amount of reading. So I didn't want this to just be all kind of reading. So we then move into our how does it work section. And for this, I went for a labeled graphic because, again, I thought this was a really good opportunity to make this as visually striking as possible. It is quite a lot of info, so it wouldn't have been, I don't think, as effective to have this as like a process block or as just bullets or whatever. It would have been a lot of reading and would have felt like a lot of reading. Whereas this is a much more creative way of displaying this information. And I've gone with this kind of post-it note idea here. And again, this is supposed to feel like someone is just throwing these ideas on the table and writing all over their ideas and putting notes down and all of this kind of stuff. I wanted it to feel like a creative brainstorming session, really. And again, we've got these icons pulled through, and each icon used kind of corresponds to the step that it's referring to. So this one is where we're talking about how you snap the pictures of your characters in the environment. So obviously we've got an icon with a camera there. This one kind of goes into detail about creating and animating your characters. So we've got a little video icon. And this is set as full width, which allows this arrow then to kind of bleed off screen. And I think, personally, I just think labeled graphics are probably one of the best Rise blocks because you can be as creative as possible with what you're putting under that labeled graphic. I've seen people use them for things like pinboard graphics. You can use them for character profiling, for software training. There is loads and loads of kind of ideas that you can put forward for this. So it's definitely one of my favourite blocks, and I love using it for kind of step-by-step instructions. I just think it looks a lot more interesting than a process block. So this next section introduces the characters themselves, these little plastic toys, essentially, that are placed into the environment and then photographed. And this took me a while to decide how I wanted to do this because I didn't want to repeat a labelled graphic again because I've just done it. And there wasn't any other Rise block really that I felt suited this section because the information itself is not loads. It's 1 or 2 sentences per kind of point. So I went down the idea of a custom image, and this is a full width image, which obviously can pose some problems because of accessibility. So I've added alt text to this, but I've also added a accordion block with exactly the same information in, so that if somebody is on a mobile or they are using assistive technology, they can still access this information just in a much easier format, because I am obviously conscious that as you go down devices, images do get sort of shrunken down. So this text, I have made this text big, but there is still that sort of danger that it could be unreadable. So then we move into our product timeline. And here I've given a bit of a breather, I suppose, in terms of the design of it and the look and feel. So up here, you can see this is all very maximalist. It's incredibly in your face, but in a good way, I think. It's lots of illustration and pattern and imagery, and it's very busy. So I wanted to then break this up with a little bit of white space. And this is why I always flat lay my kind of designs as I build them out, because I actually had this in blue originally before I built out these bottom bits. And I was just finding it was just too much. It was too much colour and it was making my brain hurt a little bit. So this white space is not only good just reducing that cognitive load, but in that metaphorical sense of giving things room to breathe. So again, I could have gone really fancy with this. This is a timeline. I could have done a graphic with, calendars and arrows and all that kind of jazz. But I didn't think it needed it really, because again, I wanted to keep this fairly simple. I wanted the information to just be available on screen. The Rise kind of number block worked perfectly. And there's no point hiding things behind clicks if it's not necessary. They have done a fair amount of clicking up there with the labeled graphic. So adding or putting these behind clicks, just there's no point. It's literally a sentence of information across each one. There's no point. It would have been just an extra thing for the learner to do. Whereas like this, they can easily access the information. I've also kept this design very simple as well. Obviously, the icons are reflective of what the content is talking about, so a calendar and a timer and everything. But I actually like this section because it feels very simple, but still within kind of the design of the overall course, and it allows a nice transition between the kind of what the product is section to where the product is going, and this kind of like timeline part. So you can see we then transition into our expansions. And here I haven't used any kind of like curvy or wavy divider. And this again was because when I flat laid it, I was finding that too many of the dividers as well was making it look a little bit weird. And this is where you can utilize contrasting colors to show differentiation. That's a really hard word to say, between different sections. So because this is stark white, when you then move into here, because this has now got that dark blue background with this sort of subtle pattern on the back, you can tell these are talking about different things. So you don't always have to use dividers to create separation between your sections. Using colour can also be a really good way of doing this as well. So here we then go to talk on about the expansion pack, so how the product is going to develop. So here it's talking about initially there'll be characters and things, but then this might be expanded to emergency service vehicles and seasonal sets and all of this kind of thing. We've pulled in the arrows here, but I haven't gone for an icon because obviously there is 4 icons here and a repeat pattern background. Adding any more illustrations would have been too much. When you're creating something quite maximalist like this, it can be really easy to sort of accidentally fall into producing something over designed. And so this is why I, again, design these as one whole page as opposed to block by block, so that you can see and identify when the learner needs a pause, when they need to not have to look it so much. And when I was designing this section out and flat laying it, I definitely kind of saw this as an opportunity to, again, to simplify things a little bit. Because then we move in to talk about the contest, and this bit is very visually striking because we want them to be excited about this. This is a contest that will run in line with the product launch of Animated Adventures. And I created this really cute little GIF here, and this is using PowerPoint. So PowerPoint is a fantastic tool for creating GIFs. It is really simple to use. I think most people know how to use PowerPoint by now. And I just utilized all of kind of the existing assets that I had from creating the rest of this e-learning, so my icons and everything. I grabbed a wavy shape within PowerPoint and inputted in these images of this child. And I just went on a stock site, and thankfully there was a series of images of this child pulling different poses and smiling and everything. And then I just animated the 4 steps of the contest, obviously with very brief headings as to what happens at each stage. And this just adds a little bit of interest. I've said before, with every single personal project, I like to push the limits of my skill set and improve my skill set in some way. And I feel like this project in particular has really done that. I've incorporated things like repeat pattern backgrounds, video content, GIFs. So I'm trying to kind of input as much media into this as possible, but in a way that is planned and done purposefully. So yeah, so that was super quick to do. I just used PowerPoint animations, and then you just export as a GIF, and you just get a really nice kind of very quick 2 or 3 second GIF that introduces this section and draws your eye to it. Again, here we've got the steps of the competition. And as I said previously, I didn't want to add clicks for the sake of clicks. So this, again, is another just number block. And we've started to add back in these icons with these arrows to introduce what this section is talking about. We then use white space again here to break up and transition between 2 sections. And this is where I had used, or had started to use, the custom code block. And the other day, or other week actually, I did a post talking about this custom code block and how I was using it. So to summarize very, very quickly, I wanted to create a reflective activity where the person doing the e-learning has to think about how they would generate interest around this competition that is specific to their role. So if they are front of house or work like customer facing, what would they do in their role to kind of let people or let customers know about the contest and generate excitement about it? So maybe when they're serving a customer, they might say, oh, have you heard we're launching this new product and you can enter the contest to win a really cool prize, like that kind of thing. So it's a sticky note kind of mind map style activity. Now, originally I had it so that you could drag the sticky notes around, but I was having lots of problems with them then shooting off the screen when I went down to like tablet and mobile view, and it was just not doing well at all. So I went back in and amended the code, and now the sticky notes are anchored to the page. So you can't drag them, and it creates this kind of grid format. But to be honest, although it looks, I suppose, less exciting or kind of visually cohesive, I guess, than the other alternative of being able to drag them around and whatever, it makes sense. This then responds down the devices really nicely, and there's no issues with people not being able to see the notes that they've given. So a good example of where sometimes functionality has to override visual design. But the good thing about this is it is a keyboard accessible activity. So as you can see, I have just tabbed over to my sticky note, and I can just type in the examples. And then if I press enter, I can then tab away again. And you might not be able to see on the video, but that little plus sign there is highlighted in black. And that is telling me that I'm on that with the keyboard. So if I press enter, you can see it adds another sticky note. So that was one of the questions I originally had. How accessible is the blocks? So I can tick off that it's keyboard accessible, which is fantastic. I don't know in terms of screen readers yet. That would have to be tested before, for example, this went out to live, like for colleagues and everything. So, but I will test that at some point as well. So I'll come back to this because I will show you what it looks like down the devices and where I have still a few issues with it, or a few things I might want to change. And depending on when I put this video out, I might have already changed these things in the final version of this course. So we shall see. And then we just move into key takeaways and next steps. Again, very simple text block. We've got a lot of visuals up here. We've got a lot of stuff to do up here. We've just had an activity where they're typing in. So I didn't feel the need to add extra clicks with this. They've just done something interactive here. Putting this behind a tab or a process block just didn't feel necessary, really. So I also want to kind of address why I didn't use the timeline block for this as well. I don't know if anybody else finds it, but the timeline block in Rise is really big. Like, it takes up so much space unnecessarily. I wish you could reduce the padding so you could almost squish the blocks a bit closer together, or switch it and have it as like a horizontal, like landscape timeline instead. I just find it takes up so much space for like the amount of information you put in it. So that's why I haven't utilised that across any of this, because I just feel it's too big. So this bit's really simple, and then we're at the end of the e-learning. And yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's come out. I think the mix of these kind of fonts and illustrations and that really bring through that theme of playfulness and childishness. And the colour scheme is accessible. I've ensured that with this cream background and this blue, and the blue and white is also accessible. The only slight issues I've had is with this header font here. And that is because this is obviously set in the hierarchy as a heading 1. And it's automatically kind of bolded this text without me asking it to, which when you've got a very bubbly text like this anyway, it's made it almost a bit thick in some areas, making it slightly more difficult to read. So that might be, again, something I try and go back in and amend. It's not too bad in, like here, because I've increased the spacing between the letters. But up here you can see like the A and the O are almost like solid because it's made it too thick. So let's quickly jump down device views and I will show you how well it scales. So let's go to tablet. You can see the image goes down lovely. All of this looks fab. That's the mighty dividers doing a good job there. Ignore the white lines. Every single time I view it on tablet view, it adds lines. So those lines aren't actually there. For some reason, in preview mode on Rise. It loves to add white lines to my work. So here we can see that labeled graphic, and the only issue I find with labeled graphics is they don't scale that well. Like, they don't seem to make these markers big enough, or what I don't feel they don't for smaller devices. I wish, like you've got in Storyline now, where we can increase the size of these markers. I wish we could do that on Rise, like choose between like a small, medium or large marker or something. So maybe something to add for like a product update or a feature update. So again, we've got that image, which has scaled down quite nicely, but we still have our accessible version, our timeline, and expansions and everything. And you'll notice that obviously because of this scaling, we do lose some of the decals on the side. And this is where it's great to incorporate some of these repeat patterns, because you never have the issue of losing that pattern off the side of your device. So they're a great way to keep that visual design in without having to worry that it will be cut off across devices. I love the way this looks. It scales down really well. All of this does too. And here we have our sticky note activity. So at the moment on this, it looks great. You can see it's moved the sticky notes to be central. It's scaled them really nicely. They're still super readable. The only issue comes when I click add another one. And now you can see we get this scroll bar within a scroll bar. And I don't like this because I just don't think it's very good kind of UI design. And I have tried everything. I have amended the code multiple times. I've put it into two or three different generative AI tools. I've Googled it. I've done whatever. For some reason, whatever I do, it does not want to get rid of this scroll bar if you add a certain amount of sticky notes, and it overflows this kind of block bounding box. So that is a bit of a pain. This button does stay anchored. So if I added like 6, you can see the button is still visible. So you're not going to have to scroll down to then add multiple notes. But that's one of the things I might go back and try again. And if anybody's got any ideas of how we can come get rid of that, or if you've had the same problem, then please share, because I would ideally love to get rid of this scroll bar within a scroll bar. But aside from that, I'm really, really happy with how this custom activity has come out. It's exactly what I wanted. And it's just something else, for the learner to do that's a bit more interesting, because Rise is so lacking in any kind of reflective activities. With Mighty, obviously, you can add in the reflection block, which is great. But Rise should have that. We should have that by now. Like, for learners to be able to type in their own thoughts or download their own thoughts or whatever. So that's why this is quite a basic activity, but it's one that I feel we can duplicate that functionality in Rise. So it's kind of necessary, in my opinion. So let me jump over to the other views. You can see it scales really nicely here. And I don't know why, but tablet landscape is always my favorite view. I always think it looks so good on tablet landscape. Yeah, super happy with how it looks here. And again, the same with that sticky note activity. And then we go on to mobile. And yeah, so you see we get the scroll bar within a scroll bar, which I feel would probably cause the most issues on a mobile, because obviously you'd be using your finger. So I'm going to test it on my own phone and just see how it works. And there we go. So you can see it scales through really nicely. Obviously, this is where we get the issues with accessibility. And again, with this marker activity, it's just so small. So people might want to make use of this accessible version instead. The video goes down nicely, and obviously they can make it full screen. And I love this intro bit. I think it looks fantastic, if I do say so myself. So yeah, and that is the finished e-learning. So if I haven't already shared it by now, then I will be sharing it soon. And I would really love your feedback. What do you like about it? What could be improved? Or has it inspired you at all? And yeah, if you've got any questions at all, then please do share it. Drop them in the comment box and I will get back to them as soon as I can.